Yeah, and the mic's on.
Mic on.
Good afternoon and welcome to Cambridgeshire County Council's Children and Young People's Committee. County Council allows filming and photography during its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures or share on social media during the meeting. Please, though, can everyone present turn their phones, laptops, iPads and any other devices to silent or vibrate whilst this meeting is taking place. We have no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will run out the doors by the side doors and we'll use the external fire exit to the assembly point in the car park. I'd like to remind everyone present this meeting will be live streamed and a recording will be placed on the Council's website in perpetuity. This meeting will be adjourned every 2 hours for a short comfort break. Members, please note there has been a change to committee membership since the last meeting with Councillor Maria King replacing Councillor Piers Coots, but Councillor Coots is going to remain as a substitute on the committee. Item one is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Tamar, please can you report any of those?
Apologies received from Councillor Maria King, substituted by Councillor Piers Coots and Dr. Andy Stone.
Thank you very much. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Thank you. We're being asked, therefore, to approve the minutes of the meeting on the 8th of October 2024 as an accurate record. Does everyone agree or do we have any objections? Councillor Sharp, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On point 236 on page 13, relating to the agenda plan, certainly Councillor Count, who was a substitute last time, raised the issue of inclusion in the papers of the internal audit report, which again doesn't, A, is not on the minutes, and B, I'll bring it up later, but obviously we're not receiving that yet. It says it's reserved to note the agenda plan and training plan. There's nothing there about the actual receipt of the internal audit report.
Can we add that in? Is that all right? Thank you. Anything else? So we'll take the minutes with that addition. An updated minutes action log was also included in the published papers. Do we have any questions on the action log? Councillor Daunton.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just desperately trying to find it. I had it a moment ago and it's disappeared. It was about the home to school transport and the CPCA. I'm sure it was in the action log. I just wondered if we'd had an update on that. I think it said coming to November meeting. Or maybe I'm misreading it.
I think it's not quite ready. Is that right, Martin? Okay. It will be coming. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. So we have received one petition for this meeting and one public question. We'll be taking the public question at item 7 on the agenda, as that's what it pertains to. We will be hearing this petition now, as it does not relate to a report on this agenda. So the petition received is titled, "Please reinstate our school buses, the SW05 and the SW06 from Emma Merrills, a local resident." Welcome, Emma. We have you as Emma Merrills. I apologise if we've got your name wrong because you're.
I use 2 names, one for work, one for life.
So Emma's joining us today on Zoom. Emma, you'll have up to 3 minutes to present your petition to committee using a traffic light system, but I don't know how we do that online, so I think when it counts down, you'll be able to see it. So once the light turns amber, you'll have 30 seconds to draw your remarks to a close. And once you've finished speaking, I'll ask the members committee if they have any questions for you about it. Just clarification. So please stay with us for that point. Yes. So over to you. Thank you.
So thank you to the committee for hearing our petition. I'm speaking on behalf of families from the Duxford area to ask that you please reinstate our school buses, the SW05 and SW06, or provide an equivalent service. This is our goal. In summer, families received information that these buses were to be cancelled. There had been no warning and no consultation. The transport team made these changes in the holidays, giving no time to action feedback. Complaints were initially dismissed unanswered, unnoted, and further loopholes made it difficult to have complaints officially registered. Hence our petition. The SW05 and SW06 were to be replaced. The majority of children from Duxford were asked to board the public 7A bus using a free bus pass, whilst the rest would board the SW01, a bus that serviced Hinxton and Ickleton. The Transport for Education team randomly selected a street in the village and put all those children on the 01. Those boarding needed to leave home significantly earlier, travelling backwards away from the school to pick up Ickleton and Hinxton. Time sat on the bus was now 40 to 45 minutes, the equivalent of driving from Bury St Edmunds. Previously, it had been 15 to 20 minutes. Meanwhile, those on the 7A received a direct journey, leaving at the previous later time. We desire an equitable solution for all children in the village to have the same journey. The well-being and safety impact this earlier start and longer journey is having on the SW01 children is clear. How tired they are in comparison to their peers, how often families are now having to drive to school to compensate. This is inconvenient, uneconomical, and bad for the environment. The 7A remains unfilled with multiple seats available. The public either think it's a school bus because it currently says not in service on the front or aren't using it. If the SW01 children board this, it costs them a fare and the driver has the right to refuse them. Now, we recognise that the transport team made a couple of changes and we are grateful for these. Coincidentally, in the last 24 hours, a proposal has come in to potentially provide a service called SW04. This could essentially be like the 06 and the remaining children would use the 7A. Now, this could potentially be the solution we desire, but we haven't had the full details confirmed yet. Essentially, we want our children picked up at the previous time with the direct journey, retaining stops at the Old Bank, Wheatsheaf, Plough and Laces Way to make it equitable for north and south sides of the village. We do feel this is achievable and we thank the council for taking our proposal seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. Do any members of the committee have any questions for Emma about this petition? Councillor Sharp, please.
Thank you. I've got one question. Just to clarify, is the village Duxford, Emma?
Yeah.
Duxford, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We will be sending you a written response within 10 working days of this meeting, and that will be circulated to members of the committee and posted on the County Council website. Thank you very much for being with us, Emma.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Sorry, yes, Councillor Goldsack.
When was the petition received, please? Well, okay, let's narrow it down. Was it days, weeks?
Last committee meeting. Yeah. It
Okay,
wasn't-
so
it
maybe I'm missing something here, but we've just had a member of the public take the time out to speak to us about a petition, yet we've got no information on it, and it's just and it's blind. Is this something that should have been shared with us?
It was shared with you. I emailed it round the other day, and it's on
Okay.
the actual website. Yeah, it's on the website.
So the wording of the petition is the same as what is in the papers, in terms of the petition. Yeah. And Tamar's emailed it round.
Okay, all right. I just didn't think we were doing the member of the public justice in terms of hearing what she's got to say and trying to, are there any questions? Well, I've missed it. I haven't read it. I haven't read it before, so I felt very much in the dark. It sounds like one or two of my colleagues may be in the same boat.
It was emailed round on Thursday at
Okay.
11:57.
Okay, well, I've missed that. My fault. I've let her down.
Councillor Slatter, please.
What I would add, and I was felt very much at sea myself, is if the officers had had so much warning, it was only when she started speaking I knew that she was from Duxford. Just a small addition like that. I had the map open for Sawston, but I don't see how we could have made any sense of that otherwise. And it's not the sort of thing one can ask in detail of a member of public. So I'm also a bit uneasy. And let's hope her last remark will indeed be the S1, S4, whatever it is, will help. Sure, the officers will deal with it, but if it's coming to committee, we need to have a little bit more fact. Thank you.
Sorry to go, Chair. Just to be clear about it, I think it's key that we get this right. You said it's as in the papers. I'm looking at the whole paper report other than the thing. There's nothing on there.
It's in the additional information section on the agenda, and I emailed
It's not
round the
in as
link
part
to it.
three.
It's on
So
the
it's
website.
agenda item 3, but it's not in as part.
No,
It's in additional meeting
Yeah.
documents at the
Okay.
bottom as published on the website with the published papers for this meeting. Councillor Hoy.
Yes, it's not trying to overlabour this point, but I could kind of understand that as a late report if it had just come in a few days before the meeting. But if it came in like a week before the last meeting, that's many months ago. So it could have surely been published with the whole agenda. It wasn't, it was added after. And we circulated it on Thursday. I mean, the agenda went out before Thursday.
that's how we normally, we don't put it in the agenda pack, we put it as a separate document.
Sorry, was it published when the agenda was published or was it added afterwards?
Probably a day after.
A day
Yeah.
after, okay. We'll take that forward for next time. Thank you, everyone. Item 4 on the agenda. So item 4 on the agenda was the corporate parenting strategy from 2023-2028. I'm going to move that this report be rescheduled to our next meeting because we need to add some more revisions to the strategy which are not here, and I would much rather take it as a whole and get the agreement of the committee for the entire thing. I do want to put on record my thanks to Corporate Parenting Board for all of the work that they put into this so far, and the officers and indeed the young people who have contributed to that.
And I'd like to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bradnam. Any comments, please? Councillor Goldsack.
Yeah, no problem with you doing that for the right reasons, which I believe exactly why you're doing it. But the question I was going to ask on this today is, it's a 5-year strategy and we're 20% through the 5 years already. So we've now got a further delay on it. You know, it's a 2023. We're about to go into 2025, right? Why are we voting on a strategy that's already 15 months old?
So I believe that sorry. I totally get your question, and it was a question that I asked as well. So with this is a strategy that was meant to dovetail with the end of the previous strategy. So that's why we have to timetable it in that way. But the work has been going on for the best part of this year to make sure that it is in a state that we want it to be in. But there's some last minute amendments which we need to make, which weren't incorporated in this version. So I get your question, but we need to have it dovetailing for time.
Even so, what I'm hearing is that at either the next meeting or the one after, when this is ready, we are going to be asked to pass a corporate parenting strategy that will be 25 to 30% of its way through its duration. So, you know, that leads me to the question is, what corporate parenting strategy are we following today? Is it the one that ran out in 2022, 23? It doesn't sit well, to be perfectly honest, Martin. It's a bit awkward to see the date. I thought it was a misprint. I genuinely thought it was going to be 24, 28, but then you read it and it's not. I just feel very awkward. And also, having presented this today, if I can suggest, Chair, we've got 2 or 3 things. I know we've talked amongst us. We've got 2 or 3 things that we've noticed in them. You know, do you want them submitted or do you want them talked about now as items that will be included in the future review?
If you could forward those on to the relevant officer who is Ranjit and the chair of corporate parenting, that would be useful. Councillor Hay, please.
Yes, as for the things that we did pick up on, this is a very serious one. I think it needs coming out. Priority 3, we will ensure that young people have access to information about age-appropriate drugs. That surely cannot be right.
Councillor Hay, thank you. You raised that at the corporate parenting subcommittee meeting, and I had taken it on board, and it has been discussed as part of the revisions that need to go forward, but we need to bring that to the next CYP.
So those will all be taken into account, which is why, or part of the reason as to why we're pulling this today. So I think we have agreement with that. Does anyone disagree? Thank you. So item 5. Item 5 on the agenda is a report on Alconbury Weald Secondary School. Appendix 1 of this report is confidential. If members wish to discuss this appendix, it will be necessary to move this item to the end of the meeting, at which point we would need to vote to exclude the press and public from the meeting on the grounds that the document contains exempt information under paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended. And that it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed, information in relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Would any members wish to discuss Appendix A? Marvellous. Assuming that caveat that we don't discuss that, we have Rachel Pinion, who is our Strategic Education, Capital and Place Planning Manager with us today, joined by Sarah Callahan. Please go ahead.
We have brought this paper to committee today to ask for approval for the council to enter into contract with Morgan Sindall to construct Alconbury Weald Secondary School. We are planning to start construction in May 25 and for the build to be completed by February 27, with the school opening to Year 7s in September 27. Firstly, please note that the electoral division is incorrect. It says Alconbury and Kimbolton, but should say Warboys and the Stukelys. Please accept my apologies for this error. At the previous committee, officers committed to bring back any instances where we are planning not to install sprinklers in a school. The recommendation here is that they are not included. The rationale for this is detailed in paragraph 3.4. Officers were also asked to bring back any instances where we are recommending deviating from the DFE school output specification. Therefore, we are highlighting that we plan to use a 3-ply roof as opposed to a 1-ply roof that is in the DFE specification. The rationale for this is in paragraph 3.5. As with any major construction project, there are several risks involved. A high-level summary of these is provided in the final section of the paper. I will finish there, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Gowing, please.
Yes, thank you. 2 questions. The first about 3.4, the fire sprinklers. Who was the fire safety advisor, please?
We have a fire safety officer in Cambridgeshire County Council, so it was her that did the risk assessment.
So it wasn't actually the fire authority?
No, it was CCC.
Okay, thank you. The second is, could you tell me the extra cost of the insurance over the period of time by not having sprinklers? Because there must be a risk.
I can't tell you that today, but I could get that information for you.
You know, it's something that should be taken into consideration, you know, it's part of the costing, shouldn't it?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, forgive me. I wanted to ask, so in terms of the 3-ply roof rather than a 1-ply roof, that sounds eminently sensible, and I absolutely support that idea. In terms of the sprinklers, I just wanted to understand whether this is a 1-storey school or more than 1 story. And although there's a sort of operational safety process that's described in paragraph 3.4 at the top of page 69 of our agenda pack, it refers to behaviours and things that people would do. And I just wanted to know, are we confident that the school would be protected if, for example, it was subject to an arson attack, as has happened at one of our schools, and that the seat of the fire was not in the kitchen, and that it might have occurred at night, rather than when people would be there to take evasive action? Thank you.
Okay, the design of the school, it's a 3-storey secondary school. And so that's the first question. And then the second question, the DFE provide a risk assessment that has to be carried out to decide whether or not sprinklers should be installed. So that risk assessment was completed and the recommendation was clear. So that's how we got to the decision.
The text refers to the fact that it puts its strength on the fact that this is a specifically designed system to protect areas associated which contain ventilation, grease extraction, etc., cooking equipment. And also it refers to a shutter door shutting off the kitchen from other areas, which makes me slightly nervous. But if the DFE have done an assessment and they're confident that it is safe, then I guess we have to go with that. Why would we seek to question the Department for Education? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hay, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question was also about 3.4. I must say I'm not very comfortable at all with us discounting a sprinkler system, particularly if it is a 3-storey building. It seems as if part of the mitigation they're mentioning is because we've got this roller shutter door built between the kitchen and dining hall that closes automatically when triggered by the fire alarm system. Also, localised fire protection within the kitchen. What happens if the fire breaks out in another part of the building and children are trapped up on, say, the 3rd floor and they can't get down? Surely a sprinkler system would allow more time for those children to be rescued. And I think we have to seriously think about that before we decide to start building schools without the proper protection. And to not include the fire service and ask for their advice, I think, is a dereliction of our duty.
Thank you. Councillor Hoy, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I was interested in the fire sprinkler thing as well, because I know I've had this discussion. It's been ongoing for a couple of years now, obviously, because of the increased costs of having sprinklers. And obviously, I know that there was a lot of guidance with the DFE and also with various fire safety councils about fire sprinklers in buildings. My understanding was that they were the guidance is that if a risk assessment says it's a low risk, that was going to be amended, and then as a result of Grenfell, that was then kind of put on hold. I don't think that's changed as far as I'm concerned, as far as I can see, sorry. So that's my first point. The second point was really, we're saying it's an average risk, not necessarily a low risk. And I think my final point is I'm a little bit uncertain about the idea of us doing the risk assessment when it's us that is also has the potential to save the money from not putting the sprinklers in. I don't think there's kind of that independent scrutiny there. So on that basis, I don't think I can support option item B. In terms of like the roof and things, I've got no issue with that, but I just feel really uncomfortable when we haven't seen the risk assessment and we haven't and for all those other reasons I just mentioned, really.
Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am afraid to say I echo a lot of what has just been said about the fire sprinkler. As part of the Fire Authority overview and scrutiny, and the Fire Authority member, as many are in here, I find it very bizarre that we haven't consulted the Cambridgeshire Fire and Service Rescue. I just popped on their website today and they have got an area on there about sprinklers, not just in schools, but within commercial buildings, etc. So let me just point out some of the comments on their website. So why should you install sprinklers? Sprinklers and other automatic fire suppression systems can save lives, homes and businesses. They provide protection from fire damage. That's another thing that you've got to think of. If this school was to burn down, how much is it going to be to rebuild? They give people a greater chance of setting out if there is a fire. Most definitely, we must be considering that on our children. They will detect a fire no matter what time of day, as that's just being brought up, even if the premises are emptied or occupied. Reduce fire risk, fire death and risk of injury. They make fires more easily controllable and limit the production of harmful smoke and fumes. And as we've heard today, reduce the effects of arson, and we know that some of our schools have had arson. Provide enhanced resilience for businesses and communities when we're talking about fire sprinklers within our businesses and in our communities, and our schools are within our communities. Mitigate fire risk commonly associated with higher risk premises. Reduce environmental impact of fire. And then when we look at our firefighters, when they need to enter burning buildings on search and rescue operations, sprinklers significantly reduce the risk to firefighters. Sprinklers are designed to put as little water in as possible on a seat of a fire at the early stage of development, and that is what's really important. I'm afraid I cannot support option B, the recommendation, for the sake of, and I know it's a large amount of money, for the sake of 850 to 900k and 2 weeks to the construction programme. I cannot support that.
Councillor Slatter, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I'm also of the opinion it's a false economy. I think we're economising now and very likely to be cursed by the future generations, because it only takes a small fire to then up the insurance premiums next time around if they've occurred in a building without sprinklers. And if they a dedicated arsonist who is fascinated by fire and fire suppression will know what to start a fire with if they've only got ones that are particularly geared up for the kitchens. This does trouble me, and we know from bitter experience it's the work of the children, which may just be some bits of paper and may not even be something one can replace with insurance, may not, I agree, be saved by sprinklers, but those are also the ones that leave the lasting trauma when they are lost. I am very uneasy that we are feeling that this is the weight of the risk assessment and recommendation. It is a large amount to put it in. I'm sure it's even more to put it in retrospectively. And those of us who are members of the Fire Authority, Councillor Gowan just beat me to it really, are particularly uneasy about this. And we would have liked to have known what the Fire Authority's view on it was rather than the DFE. But we realise it's public money. This is a difficult one, but I think it's a false economy.
Councillor Goldsack, please.
Thank you. Really interesting stuff coming out here. I'm not on the Fire Authority, but when I read this document, once again, 3.4 was the one that jumped out to me. And it very much read to me like we've got an option. We've got an option to maximise the safety of the children that you're going to use this. And in 30, I think there's going to be 370 pupils in there plus staff. So we can either maximise their safety or we can save up to £900,000. That's not what I joined council to do. I think that's a wrong decision for us to be making here. I really do. Now, what's come out in the debate and in the questions is that we've got a Cambridgeshire County Council employee instructing Cambridgeshire County Council on how to save Cambridgeshire County Council £900,000. Doesn't feel right, guys. There's something about that just doesn't feel right. So I really am questioning the should we be building schools that not maximise the safety? I'm not talking about everyone should have a cushion strapped to the back in case they fall over type environment, but in terms of fire safety here, as a maximising and protecting our investment in a building, should we not be aiming for the top here and not going for the lowest possible common denominator on cost here? So I'm afraid I can't support A, and if I can't support A, I can't support the item.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Boulat and then Councillor Daunton, and then I will come back to Rachel and Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to the first recommendation, so it does say, well, approving the contract, as long as the contract value continues to stay within the project budget. So relate to this issue around funding. My question is how, without going into the details of the finances, just wondering like how confident we are that this could stay within the project budget, given the increased cost in so many recent projects, because I think that kind of answer does impact decision on to what extent do we have any funds to invest in additional measures. But when I was looking at the first recommendation, I'm thinking, how confident are we actually on that actually staying within the budget?
Thank you. I feel like I need to come to officers before I come to you, Councillor Atkins. Is that all right? So Councillor Daunton, if you want to make your...
So going back to point B says to approve that following the completion of a Department for Education's risk assessment for sprinklers in schools, that sprinklers should not be installed. What we're being asked to do is to follow the guidance of the Department for Education. So I trust the officers to get this right, but I want to know why the Department for Education's risk assessment is that sprinklers should not be installed in schools. Just a bit more detail about that. And also in relation to that point, how or why a county council officer should be involved in the assessment. I would just like you to explain that more fully.
Just to come back a little further, I've checked with the project team and they've said that the fire and rescue service were consulted. They're happy with the design. They feel that there's the right amount of fire escapes, evacuation times are within the reasonable amount. There's evacuation lifts and stairs. And so they've just to clarify that they were consulted.
It's probably worth adding as well, isn't it, that the fire risk officer has been with us. Oh, so sorry. That better. Yeah, so the fire risk officer has also been with us for 10 years and has to operate within the training and also the guidelines. So it isn't a case whereby we're just doing a risk assessment. This, you know, this person has been trained and has been with the council 10 years, has to operate within quite strict guidelines. And as you say, we're following a DFE prescribed process.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Atkins next, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question was just one of process around this issue of the fire sprinklers, and it may be that some of the answer just provided may render this unnecessary. But I wanted to ask if we wanted to allow officers more time to assemble and present to the committee more material on this particular point. Would it be a risk to the project if the issue of fire sprinklers was not decided until a subsequent meeting in January? Obviously, I'm aware, obviously, construction costs go up at such a frantic rate that I'm loath to introduce unnecessary delay. But equally, if it's about getting the committee comfortable with that decision, whether a decision made at the January meeting would be acceptable within the existing project timeframes or not, without necessarily saying what that decision should be necessarily.
Yes, it would impact on the project timescales and the project budget having a delay, because we're now moving into MS3, so the detailed design, and moving into a planning application. So all of those things would need to be delayed.
And just to reiterate the point, the fire safety authority was consulted as part of the design process. The person that's made the risk assessment is a qualified fire safety advisor and has worked with us for 10 years, advising on countless projects throughout that time. The building design conforms with building regulations and safety standards. So I'm not sure what else there would be required. And as we've already heard, it complies with the DFE's own design regulations and standards, and the risk assessment has been completed in accordance with all of those different bodies. So
Thank you. I know a number of people have indicated they want to come back. Before I allow that very briefly, I did ask a head teacher who has a school with sprinklers installed, and this is what she sent me, and she's happy for me to say this today. So this is Tracy Bryden, who is the head teacher at Wintringham Primary School. Having opened Wintringham Primary School in 2019, we would make the following observations. One, a significant amount of my caretaker time is taken up on maintaining the system and working with contractors. This is on top of his already full existing role. Caretakers have lots of responsibilities already, and this adds a further requirement. Two, we hope it's never needed, but the likely damage or risk of accidental usage of the sprinkler system will cause the risk of damage would cause is significant, and we have huge concerns around the impact of water on the wood structure of the school. Three, the need to flush the system on a regular basis for Legionella purposes is environmentally wasteful and increases our water bill significantly. Four, the equipment/storage tanks take up a large area of the school land. This space needs monitoring and maintaining and is a potential hazard for the pupils at the school. Five, the costs of maintaining the system, a significant servicing cost to the school is over £1,000 last year, and they had to pay for repairs of nearly £400 due to the failure of a pump. The cost of the water is on top of these costs, and they do not receive any extra funding just because they have a sprinkler system. There have already been some leaks to this system which require remedial work to the decoration of the building. And six, the cost of installing the system could have funded additional spaces for the SEND children, which would have a lasting legacy and probably have a huge cost saving compared to the perceived benefits of sprinklers. And we do have a number of schools in the county who have had damage to buildings and indeed children's work and things from sprinklers which have turned themselves on without a need. I am going to allow people to come back on this as long as it is brief, and then we will move to a vote. So I think I have Councillor Hoy next, please.
Yeah, it's just a couple of points. So on the part about the officer, I'm not doubting the officer's professionalism, but up until about 2 years ago, we were installing sprinklers in schools. So the only material change I can see is a financial one and a way to save money on the project, because I don't understand what makes this school particularly lower risk than the schools that we've been building for the last 10 years. And I know that to be true because when the Conservatives were in charge of the administration, we were being told, oh, a way to save money is to not put sprinklers in schools. So it is purely being motivated by finances. And I'm not attacking anyone for that because that is the reality we operate in. Obviously, we do have a finite source of money and we do have to make decisions on how we spend that sum of money. I guess my biggest concern is obviously the DfE did look to review this policy and have put the policy on hold about sprinklers because of Grenfell. And I suppose all of the people that were involved in that disaster perhaps are now looking back and thinking about the decisions they made and could they have done anything differently. And I don't want to be, and heaven forbid anything ever does happen, but I don't want to be sat here in 5 or 6 years' time being asked, why on earth did you not vote to put sprinklers in this school, and feeling like I've got that on my conscience. I'm just not down for that, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Bradnam next, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was feeling uncomfortable about this, but actually Martin's reminder that 4 things. Well, the fire risk officer works within the guidelines and is trained to operate within very strict guidelines. It's a DfE prescribed process, and the building design conforms to building safety standards, and also that the fire and rescue service were consulted and they said that the evacuation times are within that which is acceptable. I think it would be unwise of us to contradict people whose expertise in this area has been demonstrated. So I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Goldsack, please.
I think I've mainly said what I've said, so in the interest of times, I'll just repeat that we should be aiming to maximise the safety levels of schools, not minimise them and save costs. And that's what we're looking at here.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just feel this report hasn't got all the information it needs to have in it. We've just heard from officers that all of a sudden the fire service have been consulted. It's not in this report. We've just heard from the chair about a school in my town that they're saying the sprinkler system there is just actually a pain in the backside by the sounds of it. But what we've got to look at is, why is it a pain in the backside? Is it the fact that it hasn't been installed properly? Are the maintenance side of it is not working? You know, those sort of things should not be happening with a system like that. As I said earlier, this is on the Cambridgeshire Fire Service. Sprinklers are designed to put as little water on the seat of a fire at the early stage of development. Just think about that, the early stage, so it stops it in its tracks. We don't have to have firefighters going in risking their lives. We don't have a burning building down to the ground. I'm sorry, but I cannot support it. I don't think this report is robust enough.
Was there anyone else who wanted to? Councillor Hay, sorry.
I'm with Councillor Taylor on this. I mean, I know you've quoted a primary school. Is that a single story school? That makes a difference. Where, you know, and I'm just thinking, if my grandchildren were in that school and that school burnt down, how would I feel? There's no way that I can support this. There's not enough information in the report. We should have a full detailed report from the fire service. We don't know what they were asked, what questions they were asked, so I can't support it.
Just briefly, Rachel, would you be able to circulate the report from the fire service after this meeting? Is that?
Yes, we can do, yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. I think I'm going to take the recommendations now. I'm going to take them separately. I'm assuming that that would work best for everyone. Co-opted members.
Point of order, please, Chair. You're about to go on to a vote on a matter which you've just agreed through officers in the room. We haven't had a party to all the information that should have been in the report. Do you feel that you should be going to the vote, or do you feel that you should be deferring this until such time as we've all had a chance to have the full information available and then actually vote on it?
On the basis that deferring this adds a huge risk to the project actually being able to complete on time, yes, I do feel we need to vote on this today. And if we vote no, then at that point that would go forward. But we can also have the fire service report so that people can feel comfortable that they have fulfilled their brief and done a full report onto this. Is it a point of order, Councillor Hay?
Yes. It's no good us receiving the report after we've voted.
We often take things for information. I would like to see it for information purposes. That's the only reason I've asked for it. So if we are ready to take a vote on this, co-opted members of the committee are eligible to vote on this item. So the recommendations are, I will read them first and then we'll vote on them individually. Children and Young People Committee is recommended to A, approve the council entering a engineering and construction contract with the contractor for the construction of Alconbury Weald Secondary School in April 2024 on the condition that contract value continues to stay within the project budget. B, to approve that following the completion of a Department for Education's DFE risk assessment for sprinklers in schools, that sprinklers should not be installed. C, to note the cost of and approve the installation of the 3-ply roofing system rather than the 1-ply roofing system which is included in the DFE standard specification. And D, to note the risks associated with the successful delivery of this project. So if we take those one by one, A is to approve the council entering an engineering construction contract with the contractor for the construction of Alconbury Weald Secondary School in April 2020. That should be 2025, surely.
Yes, it should. Sorry.
Okay, amend that, sorry. In April 2025, on the condition that the contract value continues to stay within the project budget. All those in favour, please? All those against? Thank you. Any abstentions? No. B is to approve the completion of, to approve that following the completion of Department of Education's risk assessment for sprinklers in schools, that sprinklers should not be installed. All those in favour, please. All those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. C, to note the cost of and approve the installation of the 3-ply roofing system rather than the single-ply roofing system, which is included in the DFE standard specification. All those in favour? Sorry. We will do. All those against? Any abstentions? And D, to note the risks associated with the successful delivery of this project. All those in favour? Those against? And abstentions, please. Thank you. Tamar, are you able to feed those back to us, please?
Okay, so for A, I have 10 for and 7 against. And then for B, I have 7 for, 8 against and 1 abstention. And then on C, I have 15 for and 1 abstention, and D, 15 for and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Sarah. Item 6. So item 6 is the draft.
So on a point of order, the sprinklers will now go ahead then, I presume? And the cost will be amended? The cost envelope will need to be amended?
We're going to have to try and find the money. So I think the whole thing, so we've approved it within the project budget. So we would have to look at cost saving exercises in order to go ahead. That's what we've approved within the project budget. The project budget is still the same project budget. We're going to have to look at where we can manage that money.
Yeah, well, let's come back to this committee then before it moves forward.
It's been approved through the project as the project budget. The sprinklers have been approved today. We will have to go away and look at what we can do with that money that has been approved today, unless we can be given more funding.
Can I just say, if you go away and look to see what you can strip out of the project so that you can put in the sprinklers, and you find you can't make that savings elsewhere, what happens then?
At that point, we would have to go to strategy and resources and assets and procurement and look at the budgets in order to see what could be done. But at the moment, what we've approved today is the budget that was in the paper. Thank you, everyone. Item 6. Item 6 is the draft Children, Education and Family Strategic Workforce Development Plan 2024 to 2029. We're joined today by Tapiwa Julius, who is our Principal Social Worker. And I'm not sure who you've got with you. So if you could introduce yourselves, thank you.
Estee Renton.
Thank you. If you're happy to go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for to the committee for the opportunity to present the draft Children, Education and Family Strategic Workforce Plan. This plan has provisionally focused on children's social care, and we're already in discussion with our education colleagues to look at the education side under the umbrella of inclusion for all. It is aligned to the ambitions of our strategic framework, particularly around ambition 5, 6 and 7. And it's also aligned to our people strategy, our equality, diversity and inclusion strategy, and as well as those two strategies, action plans.
So the workforce plan has been developed to consider the Ofsted recommendations following our recent inspection of local authority children's services. We had a framework that was up to 2025. Additionally, it also aligns with the Local Government Association Standard for Employers of Social Workers Standard 2 regarding effective workforce planning. The plan sets out key areas for development to ensure that children's social care colleagues are well supported, fully trained, and have opportunities to grow throughout their careers at Cambridgeshire County Council, which is also aligned with our vision to be greener, fairer, and more caring. The request is for the committee to agree the proposed draft and to have that in effect from 2024 to 2029. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both. I'm going to start with Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you very much, officers. I just wanted to, I have no quibbles, I don't think, with the, let me just check, with the draft strategic workforce development plan itself, which seems eminently sensible. I just wanted to check whether it was intended to have a cover that is the duplicate of the corporate parenting strategy, which has been withdrawn from this agenda and will be looked at in the new year. The cover pictures are identical. I don't know whether that was intentional, whether it's a corporate branding or whether that was unintentional, but just a thought. Thank you.
Yes, it is intentional. So it is corporate branding for children, education and families documents that are strategic.
Thank you. Councillor Daunton, please.
I'd like to ask a point of detail, please. I think it's page 5. Yes, page 5. So one of the ways in which an organisation can attract and retain staff is to have a really good training programme. And it says here, we will invest in our leaders to ensure that they have the time, knowledge and skills to lead the workforce. So if you can tell me a little bit more about the training programme and how that might change, and whether you're going to put more effort and emphasis on the training programme.
So the training program for children's social care is currently under scope and is part of the bigger piece of work that we are going to be doing as part of the workforce strategy. To date, we currently have essential training that is assigned for all social care practitioners within the different teams that they work in. What we are looking at is having a better understanding of the skills within our workforce and looking to develop those skills much further so that when we get to 2024, 25, 26, we have a new program that allows us to be able to support our workforce to develop more skills.
That's great, thank you, because I suppose it recognises the fact that it's an area which is difficult to recruit, where you're having difficulty recruiting. So you're looking to do something which is more or better than competitors. Is that what you're saying, that you're trying to update it?
So local authorities have a duty as part of the Social Care National Framework that was brought out last year in 2023 as part of the Working Together recommendations. And one of the enablers in there is about equipping the workforce. So that's what we are doing to embed that enabler. We are looking to see, what do we need? What skills do we currently have within our workforce? What does our practice model say? How are we going to deliver the ways of working? And those are conversations that we're currently having across our directorate.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp, please.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points and a question. You mentioned in the introduction to the paper about equality and diversity. Certainly, training I've been talking about is more changing equality to equity, being the one that's coming forward. So I'm interested why you've got equality, not equity. The second one is a question, and it's on page 94 on 4.3. We're talking about caseloads being reduced to 20 per social worker. Now, I'm all for giving good balanced workload to staff, but as we will be talking later on under the finance paper, the vacancies are increasing, and certainly in previous committees, I've asked the same question around recruitment. And if we're reducing the caseloads to 20, then that means we need more staff to cover the existing workload. So I'm curious as to how we're going to recruit. And the third point is, it may be just me, but I find the report very, very wordy, and I found it very difficult to go through. And going back to my civil service days, it almost reminds me of papers that I read so far, then lost the will to live reading the rest of it. And I don't mean that to be critical of those of you who've brought the paper, but I did find it very heavy going, and it didn't really get to the point that. Thank you. That my points in question.
So the council's EDI strategy is named Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. However, within that, there is a consideration of equity. If I speak specifically for children's social care, our practice model has got a practice standard which has recently been updated, which has both the wording to promote equity and equality in recognition of the difference between the two.
Okay, thank
you. On point 2, in terms of caseload, we are working within the constraints of the resources that we currently have to explore how we can work much better within the resources that we have. So, for example, as part of the partnership work that we've done, we've recently looked at our threshold document, and our threshold document has been reviewed with all our partners and has been approved by our safeguarding board. That will allow us to look at actually which children require to have social care intervention at the right time, and how can the other children that require to have early help support get that at the right time through our targeted support service and our early help. Those are some of the measures that we are looking at to see how we can support to reduce the workload for our social care practitioners. We are also working within the national framework as one of 22 local authorities who are involved in piloting resources that can support practitioners to become more effective within the resources that we have. That's a National Workforce Action Group, and we've been able to work together to identify how we utilize our IT systems to maximize time and capacity for our practitioners and to avail them to be able to do more direct work with children and families. The third point, we acknowledge that the document is really wordy, and I suppose that comes from a place of being social workers, but also trying to ensure that we captured everything. You can be assured that it's not a document that's just going to be sit and be filed. There are senior responsible officers that have been identified for all those 9 drivers. There are reporting mechanisms that have been inbuilt, such as our Rapid Improvement Board, our Workforce Board, our Workforce Operational Group, and we've also built in reporting mechanisms. So the work will be actioned, but acknowledge that it's been difficult to read for other colleagues. So we'll take that on board for any future amendments that will be made.
Yeah, and I just wanted to echo what Tapiwa was saying there. What we are doing is looking at the practice methodologies that we use and having a early intervention first approach, so that most children can get their needs met at the earliest possible stage, which is what Tapiwa was saying about preventing their needs becoming more complex and then needing a social worker. And by doing that, we can make sure that our social workers have manageable caseloads working with children who we need to be involved with, whilst the children are still getting their needs met by our early help and targeted support colleagues. So just wanted to reassure you that whether or not children have a social worker, they will be working with the right person to meet their level of need.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Tapiwa. I just wanted to address the point that Councillor Sharp made. I didn't find this a very easy document to read either. And I think it stems from the fact that we as a reader are not sure whose shoes we're in. And so, for example, if I just, on page 89, we're talking about driver 1, living our care values, and this is Martin's responsibility. And it then says, we'll use our care values to support culture change and showcase how we work with our children, etc. And then it says, improved employee engagement metrics. So in the first, we're the observer reading what the ambition is. But in the second column, I think these are what we want our social workers to be able to express, and they may even be the results of an employee survey. Because suddenly it says, feel proud to work for the council, 65% positive. And I think the problem is we don't know whose shoes we're in when that's being expressed. So just in terms of maybe making this easier for us to understand, it might be that we need to be helped to understand where this data has come from, and if these are just ambitions or if this is the outcome of the survey. It's just slightly confusing when you're trying to read the report. That's, I think, maybe might help if you're thinking about how to do it again another time or the next time you do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take that point on board. So these were the outcomes that we got from a survey, a council survey that was done, and these were the findings within our directorate. So putting them there is a visual for us to think about. Actually, when we look at it at checkpoint in March 2025, will those have improved for our workforce? But take on board the point around actually helping to be maybe more succinct and much clearer to thinking about the audience of the report. So thank you for the feedback.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Slatter, I think, next.
Thank you. I'm afraid this isn't going to be a very coherent question, but it is around trying to be place-based and collaborative. And from the councillor's point of view, we know, and we can probably all draw to mind, at least 2 or 3 pieces of casework in our inbox at the moment, which are a horrible mishmash of different responsibilities, trying to help somebody with a child with disabilities deal with debt or housing problems, etc. And we often bump up against silos, the walls of silos, And we know this is an immensely difficult thing for people on the ground, people actually doing the job, to deal with, in terms of finding out what else people are doing, even just down the corridor in the same building sometimes, let alone in a different council or for a voluntary organisation that's also got a hand in the life of this individual. And I think that's where the named social worker can help, you know, to have somebody who is your caseworker. It's what we try and make sure we have for our corporate young people, the corporate parented young people, that they have one person who can try and make sense of it for them. So I can understand those of our residents who perhaps once had a social worker, their need lapsed and then they came off the books. We also know that nobody should have a massive caseload. It's difficult to know what to do with those dormant cases. So I am afraid that some of the most conscientious social workers, or the ones most engaged with communities and collaborations, are sometimes the ones who suffer from burnout because it is such a difficult job. But I think we're all a bit wary of seeing the words and not knowing quite how it's put into practice. I know this is not a document for case studies, but that is often, certainly for me, the way I can think in terms of how do you bring in the different people, get them together and agree an action plan, and also include some of that local knowledge that comes via the councillor, even if the councillor is not in the room at the time. It is very easy for people to just be told, well, that's not my responsibility, by individuals within the system. It's not really a question, but I was looking for I thought I'd seen trying to do place-based working, and I was wondering how that would be done. I would certainly hope to see that is cooperation among departments of the council and not just being in touch with the local not-for-profit partners or disability charities or whatever. It is important that we talk amongst ourselves, and sometimes councillors find that's an issue. Thank you.
So what I heard is around place-based working and collaboration. So you will know that the council recently launched the CARE values, and the C standing for collaboration. We have held leadership events, thinking about how we can collaborate more across our different departments. We have a senior responsible officer, our service director, role leading on place-based working with other colleagues across the county council, and that links in with the social care reform agenda, where we are looking at early help, and we also have our service director Sarah, who's also involved in that. So there is ongoing conversations that are taking place within the council together with multi-agency colleagues to understand how we can work better together using the place-based. I also heard you talk about well-being and consultation. So this document was written in consultation with other parts of our council. So we had input from our well-being team, from our health and safety team, for our HR team, and they were able to provide us with information and support. It also had input from our practitioners on the ground, as we did a series of engagement in there. So that was all considered within that.
That sounds excellent, and thank you very much for the courtesy with which you've put that to, because I mean, you know, it's there and I didn't see it. I would just wait one point. If there is a senior officer whose responsibility is to keep an eye on the place-based cooperation amongst and the breaking down of silos, because they can see them from above, it would be very helpful for councillors to know who that is in their area. And I'm not sure whether I've missed an email, but if one did have an email from that person to tell them that they are the ones looking after that particular area, that would be very useful, because then that's somebody we could ask a general question about, or two, I should say. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Goldsack next. Anyone else that I've missed? Nope.
Thank you. Can I just draw your attention to page 9 of your actual document, which is page 87 of the agenda plan. And in the bottom left-hand corner, it says Cambridgeshire Academy for Reaching Excellence. And we've called that CARE, which, you know, we do get quite a lot of, starting with Cosmic and other things, which I think is quite clever. But the very page below that, in the document, it says, sorry, 2 pages below that, it says Action Plan 1. Our CARE, C-A-R-E, which stands for Collaborative, Accountable, Respectful and Excellent. So we've got it twice, the same acronym, but for different meanings. And then we wonder why as members we get a little bit confused. I think that's just really to back up and to ask you to have a look at that again, just to be very careful around those sort of things, because we're using the same CARE acronym for different meanings.
So the Cambridgeshire Academy for Reaching Excellence was launched a year ago on the 20th of November in this building as part of DFE grant that we got for improvement. It was an acronym that was identified from consultation with colleagues in children's social care. It seems to have been favourable when the council was looking at our values. And so it was adopted at that stage, and it aligns with being caring Cambridgeshire. So we have a very different symbol for the Care Academy, and then we have very different symbols for our care values, is how we are currently distinguished. It is both. So our Cambridgeshire Academy for Reaching Excellence is an academy that provides us with our learning and development and support. The care values are what the council say is how we do the way that we work together. So we should be collaborative, we should be accountable, we should be respectful, and we should strive to achieve excellence. And they're very different symbols for that. So it's an acronym used for that, for our values as a council. So they're both there intentionally.
I do get the point on the confusion though, Mark. I do, yeah. Anyone else this afternoon? No. In which case we'll move to the vote. Co-opted members of the committee are eligible to vote on this report. Children and Young People's Committee is asked to agree the proposed draft Children, Education and Family Strategic Workforce Development Plan 2024 to 2029. All those in favour, please. Those against and abstentions. Thank you.
What is the outcome, please? Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We now move, thank you very much, both. We now move to item 7. So item 7 is an update on the safety valve programme. We have received a public question in relation to this item, which we will hear first. So Ms. Day, welcome to our meeting. You will have, once you're ready, up to 3 minutes to address the committee using the traffic light system. So the amber light will come on when you've got 30 seconds left. And Sarah will show you the microphone if you need, and start when you're ready.
Push that one. There. No. Was it on now? Oh, yes, it is. Marvelous. Right. Okay. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to ask my question today. It seems a bit weird that I'm speaking before the report's actually delivered, because I want to sort of refer to some points that are actually in the report. And also listening to some of your items before, it strikes me there are sort of common themes with regard to the balance of funding and outcomes for people, or in this case, children and young people. For instance, towards the end of the report, can't remember what point it was, is historically over the last sort of decade, we'll have been looking at sort of 7% funding coming in. It wasn't referenced with regard to
how much that actually was. It was just on a percentage basis, then dropping down to an expected 3%, which is a colossal drop, when there is a rising demand in the area of a 12%, which is the balance of funding is never going to be met. That has been another observation that I've made with regard to the modelled data and where that has arisen from, because it's modelled from somewhere. And if that information with the percentage is anything to go by, it's a decade worth of getting it wrong and then having another go to resubmit to the DfE is kind of the, let's hope it's going to work this time. So that was just a sort of a little bit of an observation that I made from listening to the conversations so far, and having had a look at the report, which the report was a little bit difficult to read. And I'm quite familiar with what the safety valve is. I've been following it for a little while, but I was really pleased to see that it was about as transparent as I've seen it yet, which was most welcome indeed. But anyway, getting to my actual question that I submitted. So sorry, Councillor Goodliffe, for doing a little preamble there. So my actual question to councillors is, I've got concerns about how the children are going to be taught. It seems unfair to me that neurological children should be subjected to the foibles and differences of neurodiverse children. Will the neurotypical children be taught in the same classrooms, or will there be division in schools? Whereas neurodiverse children learn in very different ways, so do neurotypical children. But neurotypical children, being the norm, may get frustrated by having to wait for neurodiverse children to catch up. Is the thought that neurotypical children will be employed to do remedial work with neurodiverse children, helping them to make the progress and whatnot that they need to do? So that's my actual question. I've gone on a red light now, so thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms Day. Committee, do we have any questions of clarification only? Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your point, your background and your point. Do you have personal experience of this? Firstly, in the modelling side of things, because you sounded as if you were wondering whether the modelling was using reliable data, for example. I think that's maybe the point you were making. And the second was, do you have experience of children who are neurotypical and neurodivergent? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. In the first question is with regard to the data sets. It's been my observation, as I declared, in just watching that, how come what was being submitted to the DfE was always short from what was actually coming in, unless there was a bizarre formula which was setting the council up to constantly fail in its legal statutory duties, given that the Children's and Families Act is a primary law. And that is noted as one of the aspects of risk to the council in so not being able to deliver its primary responsibilities when also trying to balance the books. So I've been watching it and looked at the data that went back for a decade since the Children and Families Act came into play in 2014, and not one single year has the data gone in to be correct. So that's your question one. Your question two is, I have a son who is has a number of various different challenges and has an education, health and care plan. He is now being detrimentally impacted. Fortunately, touch wood, he hasn't been detrimentally impacted by this particular part of the system, but has had detrimental impact in other parts of the system that has led to increasing problems for him. I'm also, just as a further little bit of background why I can speak with knowledge here, is I'm a peer supporter with access to probably in order of about 3,000 families. So get a good indication of what it's like for families, for children across the piece, across all of the areas of education. And what the general music is from in the last 12 months, every year since I've sort of been involved, which is in the last decade, at least since I've been involved with it. And being involved with families, but certainly looking at the perceived decline and the actual decline that children are experiencing with support for their special educational needs. Sorry, I've been a bit verbose and gone on a bit there. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Thank you for answering my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't see anyone else indicate to speak. Thank you very much for being with us today. There will be a written response to your question, which will be sent to you within 10 days, and I will ensure that's circulated to members of the committee and posted on the website as well. Thank you very much for being here. Feel free to stay for the discussion. Sarah, if you can introduce the report for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, great. Thank you. So the purpose of this report really is to update on the safety valve agreement with the Department of Education, and to update you in terms of what have we done to meet the terms and conditions of that safety valve agreement, and also to highlight to you, and I think this has probably been referenced in the conversation just now, the context that we operate within and the challenges that that context presents in terms of our ability to meet the terms and conditions of that safety valve agreement. So it's probably helpful to start with saying, well, what were the terms and conditions? So in March 2023, we entered an agreement with the Department of Education whereby they would fund us 49 million over a period of 5 years on the proviso that we met certain terms and conditions so that we could then achieve a balanced budget because we were projecting a deficit. So it's important on this point to talk about the context that we're operating within. And I think the conversation just now is illustrated in point 3.27 within the paper. And what we're illustrating there is over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been an increase of 45%, 46% of children identified with education, health and care plans in Cambridgeshire. And this is not unique to Cambridgeshire. There's been a significant increase nationally. And the impact of that is obviously driving an unsustainable financial pressure. But as has been stated, the Children's and Families Bill has an expectation that we meet the needs identified within those education, health and care plans. The approach that we're proposing is that we adopt a needs-led approach which looks at how do we collaborate across education, health and care through the implementation of an Inclusion for All framework, where our ambition is, under that corporate ambition that we want all children to thrive, our ambition would be to meet need at the earliest point and put in a response to that need so that children are able to thrive in mainstream schools where appropriate. Within the report, you'll see that there's a pie chart that illustrates our spend currently and what's driving that financial pressure. And we've currently got, I think it says in the report, around 307 children in independent high cost provision. Typically, the median cost of a placement for independent provision is around about 65,000, whereas a placement in mainstream is around 14,000. Now, absolutely, this has to be driven by meeting the needs of children, and it isn't within our gift to say that we will move children in high-cost independent provision into mainstream. But what we have to do is build capacity to meet those needs so that children are able to thrive, have a sense of belonging in inclusive schools and settings, which will also manage down that financial pressure. So the approach has to start with children. It has to be that we create an inclusive environments where those children are able to thrive. And that is going to take time to embed. So within the report, you'll see that we have developed some enhanced resource provision, which is, and there's some illustrations about the cost savings attached to these provision. And that's about having specialist support on mainstream school sites so that children get that specialist support when they need it, but are also able to mix with their peers and enjoy that socialisation and develop those life skills within a mainstream school. The reference earlier to that 7.7% investment is in 3.27 of the report. And you can see nationally, there's been an investment of 65 million in high needs blocks across the country. However, that's eclipsed by the rate of growth in terms of demand, which is at 12.2%. So although there's been investment, in real terms, that actually equates to a reduction. So we are one of 113 local authorities who are engaged in monitoring with the DfE, identified either as a safety valve authority or a best value authority. So all those local authorities are working to address significant deficits, and the combined impact of those deficits is 1.2 billion. So it's important to recognise the context that we are operating within, and also to note the changes that we are aiming to make, which is about strengthening our decision making, ensuring that where we are agreeing to education, health and care plans, that they're actually resulting in improved outcomes for those children, and that the educational experience that they're having is better because of it. What we want to do is obviously meet the needs that don't necessarily have a reliance on a plan, but the needs are met so that those children are able to thrive. So there is more detail on the Inclusion for All framework, and I just wanted to make reference to the earlier report. One of the areas of focus within that is inclusive people. So obviously, if we want to upskill and enable children to thrive within mainstream provision, there is an ask in terms of training and support around that. And that's what PWER was referencing in terms of extending that workforce strategy. So it also encompasses the work of Inclusion for All. So the 6 areas of focus, there's more detail within that, but I'm happy to pause, take questions, points of clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Daunton first, please.
Thank you. Well, really just 2 points of information, please. One is the increase in demand in Cambridgeshire. How does that map to the increase in population? We know that we're one of the fastest, if not the fastest, growing parts of the county. That's one question. And the other question is, I think you said, Sarah, 113 local authorities, 113 are in a very similar position. So what can we learn? What can you, as a group of 113 local authorities, learn from each other in tackling the problem? Or are the problems so diverse and different across the 113? Thanks.
Thank you. Really helpful question. So in terms of the population, it's more about the percentage of the population and whether we're an outlier. What we know is that 17% of children in Cambridgeshire are either identified as having SEN support or an education, health and care plan. Where we are a bit more of an outlier, and that's very similar to the national picture, but the weighting between the amount of children identified at SEN support level and the number of children identified as education, health and care plan, we have a higher percentage of children that have an education, health and care plan. And the interesting thing about that is also that we have a higher percentage of children who are identified as having a moderate learning difficulty. So there is a sort of there is something to investigate there in terms of the inclusive nature of the services, of our settings, in terms of our children. Is the introduction of the SEND reforms did kind of drive a process-driven approach whereby the golden ticket was an education, health and care plan. So, but what we need to ask ourselves is, once you have the plan, is it improving outcomes? What we know is that the standard of educational outcomes are stagnating. They're not improving as a result of that. So it's about how we change our approach to enable us to support improved outcomes. But your second question about what can we learn, last week we held the first of our Inclusion for All summits, where we brought together different types of schools, primary, secondary, early years, but also different status of schools, along with some of our partners. And that was facilitated by colleagues from other local authorities. One from Hertfordshire, similar large county such like ourselves, and another was from Norfolk, which is also identified as a safety valve authority. So we're working with a range of local authorities who are also experiencing those pressures to learn from them about what works well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Atkins, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's a few references in the paper to a meeting with the DFE at the end of October. I just wondered if we could have a kind of informal gloss as to how that meeting went, and if there's been any kind of communication in the 3.5 weeks since then.
Yeah, I can. Yes, sorry. So we did submit an updated agreement on the 31st of October. We have a meeting scheduled this week with the DFE. The focus of that meeting is really just to understand some of the technicalities around the financial information that we submitted. So we feel confident that the information that we've presented is thorough. There are ambitious plans within it, obviously, because of the scale of the deficit that we're trying to address, and we've got to obviously bring our partners and our schools along with us to ensure that we do implement that within the timescales.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Goldsack next, please.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for the report and for the way you're answering the questions, which is very detailed. Thank you. On page 104, 3.8 is really the crux of the finance matter. My question may be too large to answer, but I'll ask it anyway. It says to date that we've had 21.5 million from the DFE, and there's 27.5 will be released subject to approval and delivery of a renegotiated agreement. Are there any bumps in the road ahead? Because without this, we really are in trouble.
So that was the purpose of us resetting that agreement. So when we initially agreed with the DFE in March 23, there were conditions attached to that funding being released. Because we didn't comply completely with the actions within the right timescales, that's why we have resubmitted that application to the DFE on the 31st of October, and we're imminently waiting agreement. And at that point, the rest of that funding will be released in staggered terms.
If I can come back on that, Chair, through you. So what you're saying is you believe that you have more than surpassed the expectations of the DFE to release the 27.5 million?
I think saying we've surpassed the expectations of the DFE might be a bit of a over-egging, perhaps. I think what I'm saying is that the plans within it are ambitious. They're ambitious for children because we want children to have their needs met, but they're also ambitious financially because if you look at that pie chart, our ability to influence the spend is dependent on us having sufficient capacity to meet those needs. And we did have, obviously we had the commitment for the 2 new special schools, and we've also got the enhanced resource buildings that we're also developing. So we know that we have the right actions in place. One of the things that is challenging is some of the things that were outside of our control. For instance, within the SEND reforms, parental choice is key to that. And we spend 22 million on that independent provision. And sometimes parents really want that independent provision. And sometimes it's absolutely the right choice for their children. Other times, what we know is that they can be seduced by what those independent providers offer. And we actually feel confident that we could offer better provision more efficiently within Cambridgeshire. But we've got to develop and grow that. So the plans are ambitious, but I believe they're the right plans, and the term of the agreement and where we've weighted that activity, I feel confident that we will be able to deliver that. But there's a number, obviously we've got to take schools with us, we've got to take parents, carers with us. So it is an ambitious plan, and nationally it's an ambitious plan.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Sarah, for your report. I just wanted to come back briefly. I've got two questions. One was just to interrogate a bit more closely the element that Councillor Daunton raised, which is you explained that we have 17% of children in Cambridgeshire either have special educational needs support or an EHCP, and that's very similar to the national percentage. But the point that Councillor Daunton was making is we've had a major uplift in our population in toto. And so what I'm wondering is that increase in population, and therefore that 17% represents more children, is that the argument that we are making to the Department for Education, that because we have an increasing population, we've got more children with these extra needs that would justify our renegotiation of the safety valve? So in other words, do we have and the second element of that is, do we have a higher than national SEND need in Cambridgeshire? Do you want to answer that first?
Yeah, I understand the point that you're making. I think what I'm trying to clarify is that our position in terms of the percentage of children as a population is not at odds with national, but obviously the numbers, because we're a large county, are larger. But the way our funding works is there is a national funding formula, and the funding to support children with special educational needs is within the high needs block of the Dedicated Schools grant. And that national funding formula takes into account the size of the population, and it also has different factors, so that we're not disproportionately impacted by the numbers. It's more about the complexity of need and where we've seen that grow. And the biggest growth is around autistic spectrum conditions. And obviously they can be quite complex. And what we hear from our schools is that the types of need that they are now supporting are needs that are much more complex and much more difficult to manage. So particular needs such as emotionally based school avoidance is something that's grown considerably post-COVID, because we've seen children's anxiety levels increase, and they've been out of school, and parents have also been used to them being out of school. So there's some types of needs that are quite new and growing that we're trying to manage also. So it's less about the numbers, because that's compensated for in terms of that funding formula, but it's more about the growth areas and the complexity attached to those growth areas.
Thank you. That's what I was driving at, that we have a greater number because our population has increased, and that's being covered by the formula. But as Chair of Corporate Parenting Subcommittee, I'm also aware that we have more and more complex needs in Cambridgeshire than some other counties. So thank you for that. And you've also brought in the second question, which was this impact of COVID and the fact that we now have a cohort of children going through education who've suffered maybe more than we understood during COVID, and that has a number of complexities associated with it. which we also need to take into account in this provision, forecasting our need for provision, because these children are going to go through the years of our schooling. So did you want to add anything about COVID or?
Just, I suppose, the other growth area post-COVID is speech language communication. And obviously, we know with increased digitalisation that there is an issue in terms of children's developmental progress around speech and language in particular. So I think that takes us back to what are the supports, what are the programs in place to support schools, settings, to manage and identify that speech delay, because speech and language is one of those areas that, if it is addressed earlier on, really can make a difference. And it does manifest itself also in behavioural issues. And you'll see within the report the huge leap we've seen in children accessing alternative provision, and often, sometimes they're behavioural issues that are stemming from unmet need that, if supported earlier on, could have kept those children in education.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm glad to hear your very thorough answers to that. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Sharp next, please.
Thank you, Chair. A few comments and a question, and I just want to touch on the last discussion with Councillor Bradnam, because I'm a governor of a small primary school, and also a very large secondary school, and certainly the issues that have grown since COVID have been quite noticeable. And the current year 10 and current year 11, it's going to be interesting to see when we come to the data at the end of the year, because year 10 and year 11 did not sit SATs because of COVID. So it's been very difficult to measure, secondary schools are held to account, for want of a better word, to improve the SATs results when you get to key stage 3 and 4. So that'll be interesting. And some of those children have had very troubled times. That wasn't one I was going to speak on, but I think it was, worth commenting on. I just really want to go to 2.8 firstly, where we're saying about we're focusing on meeting the demand rather than making the cultural changes we need to make, which is obviously understandable. And I then go to 3.2, which has got listed all of the safety valve agreement conditions. And I think the most important thing is, obviously, we've got to achieve the best output for each individual child. That's what's got to, in my opinion, what's got to happen. Okay, yes, we've got to find out. I think one colleague mentioned earlier, we've got a finite budget, so obviously we've got to work within that. But that's the most important thing. But I'm just, and it's a very detailed, well, it's a short question, but it is within that 3.2 and all those eight conditions. What does good look like on each of those? What is the time scale that and it may be something you're not going to answer now, and it may be something that's not been formulated, but how are we going to know that we've actually achieved some of those conditions? Because it's not just about money. And the other thing, it's not a question for you, is just, again, I sound like a broken record, is in terms of we do need to get that internal. I've not seen this report, but see what Audit and Accounts about 6 months ago said it should come to CYP, and I think we do. I'm going to labour the point. I'm going to carry on until we get it. So we do need that to come to this committee. But if you, the first 2 points are really for you, Sarah. But thank you for the report.
Yeah, I would like to talk about what good looks like, actually, because I think what good looks like is the children with special educational needs are not overrepresented in our exclusion figures, which they currently are. That in our education electively home educated figures, which they currently are, and not overrepresented in our poor attendance figures, which they currently are. So I think if we were to define what does inclusion look like, it would be children in SEND accessing their childcare offer, having a smooth transition into school, arriving in school, school ready, staying in school and having good attendance, also not being suspended, and also achieving as much as they can. Because although, you know, if our ambition is that we want all children to thrive, then some of our children with SEN are not currently thriving. And I think they're the key performance indicators, and they're the ones that we, through that Inclusion for All framework, and Martin will be chairing the Inclusion for All Change Board, they're the measures that we will be currently reviewing to say, are our children with SEN being given the opportunity to thrive in Cambridgeshire, and what's the evidence to demonstrate that they are?
Back very quickly on that. Thank you for the answer. Yes, I think it's something from a personal point of view. I'd like to, you know, see how these 8 bullet points, how we are achieving them, and I think we do need regular reports back to this committee on how we're actually succeeding with those and other points that come forward when because that might not be an exhaustive list. There might be other things that come through. But as I said, the most important thing is each of the individual children, that they get as good as education as we can give them within some of the difficult issues that some of the children have. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hay next, please.
Thank you, Chair. A colleague has already mentioned about 27.5 million that's to be released in instalments subject to the approval of delivery of the renegotiated agreement. In 3.3, it also mentions in the funding a further 11.3 million for capital funding to support SEN provisions on mainstream school sites. Have we received any of that, or is that also dependent on the renegotiated agreement?
In terms of the capital, yes, we have, and we have got, we are rolling out that enhanced resource provision. We've got 4 in our secondary schools, we've got 1 in our primary school, and another 3 further to roll out. We're currently in the process of evaluating the impact of those models, and what we've learned is that the therapeutic practice that is supported by our educational psychology service is really critical in making the difference to those children, because a number of local authorities have adopted a similar approach but have not found them to be successful. And what we're finding makes the difference is that real intensive support that is overseen by our principal EPs to ensure that the right level of intervention is given to those children that enables them to then also access that mainstream provision, because you don't want it to just be a site, you want it to actually be a model that meets the needs of those children and enables them to thrive in the mainstream, so that they come in, they don't stay in, they're equipped to then also access mainstream provision also.
Thank you, that was a very good answer.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up on it's 3.16, excuse me. It's the 1% block transfer that has been commented on. So that's 23 and 24, that's 4.5 million. 24, 25, 4.8 million. And in the report, it says the council would be 9.3 million worse off at the bottom line if the transfers had not been agreed. And this is obviously through Schools Forum. So we are very much grateful for Schools Forum, enabling this to happen. The impact of the result of the funding within the report says it was for enhanced resource bases, ERBs. And I do believe that's 8. So that's 8 through the whole of the county. Now, when I was on Schools Forum, which I do believe was last week, there seemed to be a bit of, I don't know what the best word to use, but I think worry, concern that these schools are saying, yes, please, we would like to help with these enhanced resource bases. But it felt like they hadn't been given that opportunity, or certainly the communication hasn't been as good as it should have been. Because when they agreed to do this transfer over the last 2 years, they did say, please keep us informed. Please let us know what's happening with this money. We want to see what's happening with this money. We want to know the outcome, to see that our children are getting that educational outcome. In the report as well, it's saying developing capacity, new school places already delivered. So within those places, special school places, 120, enhanced resource places, as I said, 8. When I looked at that pie graph, we're looking at number of children in enhanced resource bases, 329. So that's within those 8 places, I'm presuming, which doesn't, when you think about it, account to a lot within our county. But I am, on a positive note, within the report, I am glad to see at 3.24 that the first phase of the programme will be to focus on inclusive practices with the enhanced bases. So that is really good. Just would like to know, if I could, Sarah, what we mean by redistributing of alternative and independent specialist educational provision. I'm just trying to work out what we mean by that. And I think it might be what you've just spoke about earlier, but I just want you to expand on that. And also, can we please make sure we keep School Forum involved in everything that we're doing? Because I think that is a vital part of our connection to get this safety valve and everything else that we need for our special educational needs to work. And also, I don't know if anyone knows, they're at the moment, and it's public, it's a public meeting. At the moment, it stands that they are not looking at transferring the block as yet, but we will be having another meeting. But I do believe it has already gone to Department of Education, but they at the moment are not happy with that transfer. But I have a feeling it's because we are not keeping in touch with them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There's a lot in there. So, yeah, the disapplication. So basically what you can do is the 4 blocks of funding in the Dedicated Schools grant. The high needs block is the focus of the safety valve. That's where we fund and we make the decisions around that funding in terms of meeting the needs of children with special educational needs. What you can do and what we have asked to do, and it's called a disapplication, is transfer money from the schools block, which is the money that goes out to the schools, across to the high needs block. Now you can transfer 0.5% without a vote. But if you want to increase that to 1%, which is what you're referring to, and the discussion at Schools Forum on Friday was to, previously we have transferred 1%. We were requesting that we would transfer up to 1.25%. To do that, we have to have agreement from the schools around the table. We have 34 schools within Cambridgeshire who are either in deficit or are projecting to be in deficit. And part of what's underpinning those deficits is the increased challenge that they also are experiencing in terms of managing children with additional needs. So there was an interesting debate, as you would expect, and what will happen now is, because Schools Forum did not choose to support that disapplication, that will be escalated to the Secretary of State for Education for approval. I'd like to just make the point that the Secretary of State for Education has said that the SEND system is broken. And one of the reasons, if you look in the ISOS independent report about the financially sustainable schools, within that report, one of the issues, one of the challenges which I think played out within Schools Forum, is that the SEND reforms were aiming to have a collaborative approach across education, health and social care. In reality, it's created a competitive approach. And it's unfortunately, it has pitched schools against the local authority. It's pitched schools against parents. It's pitched parents against the local authority, because ultimately it has driven a process that is unsustainable, and the funding, as I've described previously, has not increased in line with demand. So unfortunately, rather than promoting a collaborative approach, what has happened is people have tried to resolve in isolation their own issues, as in parents are fighting to get the needs met for their children, schools are fighting to achieve a balanced budget, and the local authority is trying to support parents, trying to work with schools. So ultimately, when we went to request that disapplication, you know, the message very clearly back from schools was, we understand and respect the approach that you are proposing. However, we want to send a message back to the Department for Education that there is insufficient funding to support this. And that was the premise on which they voted. So that will now be escalated, obviously, to the Secretary of State, who, as I've said, has recognised that the SEND system is broken, and we are waiting for changes in terms of an approach to SEND that enables the local authorities to manage need in a budget envelope that enables them to. So I guess what we're trying to propose within the Inclusion for All approach within this report is to move away from that competitive approach to a collaborative approach that puts children first and says, how are we going to use the resources that we have available to us to support in the best way possible improved outcomes for those children. And it isn't easy, but unless we adopt that collaborative approach under one shared vision, then we're going to continually foster that competitive nature that is not good for parents and carers, and is not ultimately good for children. So it's not an easy fix, and I think that's quite clear within the report, but it's the only way that we're going to shift the narrative to support rather than competition. So I think we're on the beginning of a very difficult journey, and that inclusion summit that I referred to earlier, and we had the initial one last week, and we'll have a much bigger one on the 22nd of January. The aim of that inclusion summit will be, this is the budget envelope available to us. How are we going to use it to best effect to support those children? And we have to work collaboratively, because saying you've not got sufficient funding can't be the end of that conversation, because at the end of the day, we've got to meet the needs of those children.
Thank you. I'm mindful we've got 2 minutes left before we need to have a break. I've got Councillor Slatter still to come, please.
Be pleased to know that one way or another, my questions have already been asked and answered.
Perfect. The other thing I'd like to add in, just of note to the committee, I know we're obviously having a full review of the SEND system, or the government is undertaking such. It also announced last week that it would look at the pupil impact of the safety valve system. So obviously this is of concern to people across government and the DfE. So we'd be interested in seeing the outcome of both of those things going forward. In terms of this paper, Children and Young People's Committee is recommended to note the updates provided on the Safety Valve programme, and the committee is asked to note that the Dedicated Schools Grant DSG and the high needs block funding issues facing the council are a national issue affecting the majority of local authorities, and the council's position is that special educational needs SEND remains an area of educational policy in urgent need of reform. The committee is asked to note the scope of the work underway to meet the terms of the Safety Valve Agreement by reshaping our offer of support to children and young people with additional needs, by identifying and meeting need earlier so that more children and young people can thrive in mainstream schools where appropriate. As we've noted the report, no vote is required on this item. I'm going to take a 5-minute break. Is that all right with everybody? Thank you. Thank you, everybody. If we can reconvene. We're moving on to item 8. Item 8 is the Finance Monitoring Report for October 2024. Welcome to Martin Wade, our Strategic Finance Manager. I was going to say monitor. I'm clearly getting tired. Who will introduce this report for us. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you. Yes, so this is the report to the end of October 2024, which sets out the financial position for children's education and families in terms of the figures. So just the headline figures, really. There's been a worsening position from last month due to the increased commitments on children and care placements, which results in a revised bottom line for children's of 7.4 million compared to 6.9 million at the end of September. As you can see, we're now reporting at a £7 million pressure on children and care placements, up from the previously reported 4 million. Is it not working?
Sorry, Martin, could you move the microphone slightly closer to you?
Of course I can. Is that better?
People, can you not have other discussions in the meeting, please?
Apologies. Can you now hear me better? Is that better? Sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, as I was saying, the worsening position from last month due to the increased commitments against children and care placements. So we're now reporting £7 million overspent on children and care placements, up from the previously reported 4 million. However, we have managed to mitigate the majority of that overspend with savings in other areas within children's. Building on from Sarah's paper on the safety valve, we're also now reporting an increased pressure in year on the high needs block and dedicated schools grant, which is now increased to 18.4 million. And that aligns with the resubmission of the safety valve agreement that was referenced in the previous paper as well, and reflects that continued increase in education, health care plans and complexity of need. Again, that was referenced in the previous paper. So as I say, these are the kind of the main headline changes from the figures previously reported to committee. So I'll pause and take any questions or comments on the report.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. As I just said to Martin, 2 questions, but I think you've actually answered one of them in what you just said. Because obviously the move from 4 million at the end of August to 7 million at the end of October, and looking at it, that's roughly in line with if you extrapolate the current spend. So we're possibly that forecast probably not too far out. And the other question you've partly touched on as well, actually, is we've got an underspend of 1.5 million on strategic management, which looks like it's basically around the money we've received from the household support fund. So effectively, we're not going to spend that money. We're going to use it just to help with the deficit. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So effectively what's happened there, the continuation of the household support fund has meant that we've been able to release the 1.5 million of core funding, which was previously going to be used to support the free school meal holiday vouchers. So that continuation of that household support fund has allowed us to do that. In terms of that, yes, so spot on your assessment.
Thank you. Councillor Goldsack, please.
Thank you. Thanks again for the report. Very clear, very concise. It does exactly what it says on the tin, which is lovely. Under the home to school transport, it's always been a bugbear of mine. Are we absolutely confident we're exploring all the ways of getting this as low as we possibly can? Because it just seems to be running amok and go. I didn't know whether to ask the question of yourself or Martin, to be honest with you. So whoever wants to answer it, I'm happy with. But it's Martin. Okay.
I can tell you, Martin will definitely answer it. We have had our transformation program, which has 7 different work streams looking at the efficiencies within the home to school transport. But you're right, demand continues to grow. And that is linked in many ways to the growth in SEND and the HCP provision, as children who are not attending their local school need to get to the school that is most appropriate for them. We have completed our procurement process, and we have an external consultancy coming in starting on the 2nd of December to do some work looking at all of our policies, procedures and options for being further efficiencies across that. So that report will come early in the new year. It's a short piece of work they're doing, so we'll have a quick turnaround. Hopefully that will give us some indications about whether there are other options for us or whether what we're doing is in line with what is required.
If I can come back. Thank you. I left my mic on, apologies. Yeah, thank you for that. Do we know at this stage of the year, probably not, but do we have any idea at this stage of the year as to whether we're looking at any school reception year bulge situations on applicants? I know that because my local primary school went through a similar issue, didn't do that. And obviously what that does then, it compounds the school transport issue, because those pupils that don't get in because they're over the 30. And I think also for members' benefit, when you've allowed in a small village, when there's been infill development and children come into those homes in those infill development, they then live closer to the school than maybe families that have lived there 3 and 4 generations. And actually, the 3 and 4 generations who have had the heart set on going to the local village school can often be displaced because of that infill development, because of numbers. So I just think we've got to adopt a more flexible approach in those early years of getting those kids in that school. I will also add that I am also very aware, Martin, that we are forecasting lower intake numbers in the next couple of years. There's many reasons for that I'm not going to go into. So I'm just interested to see whether, what we're doing about that.
I'll start in the new. So on the forecasting, I'll pick up on the pupil forecasting. We have a comprehensive forecasting methodology that we use, and it's a 5-year rolling forecast, and it's reviewed every year as housing developments come online, and then they either slow down or they stop or they pause. So it is refreshed every year. So it is probably pretty accurate, I think. And that means that we do know where the pressure points are coming through, which is why we've got so many projects in our schools capital program, so that we can make sure that we're creating places where we need them and not where they don't need to be, depending on what developments we've got. Martin.
Yeah, and I was just going to add to that, we obviously have discussions with Schools Forum about growth and where that growth is. And I'm actually meeting with place planning colleagues before the end of this term to start looking at where we think those pressure points in primary and secondary are going to be for next academic year. You're right, the primary numbers themselves are slightly down, but we are seeing that bulge in numbers coming through into secondary as the numbers kind of age through the process. So yeah, working closely with place planning colleagues to ensure that schools have the capacity to meet that need.
Just one comeback on that, if I can, Chair, through you. And it's very quickly, which is, if you get into that situation and we get into those bold situations or anything like that, I certainly found from my thing coming in late, I was able to add some assistance and help. And I think it's absolutely imperative that I think I speak on behalf of most members, if not all members. We all would like to be able to do more for our residents at that time and be able to help. So the earlier we can be notified of potential issues in our wards, etc., and you all know which ones they are, then that would be really useful information for us to help the ward members to help you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Daunton, please.
I want to pick up on something that Councillor Goldsack is saying and relate that back to what Sarah was saying earlier on. In relation to home to school transport, is there any correlation between the complexities that Sarah was talking about earlier on and the home to school transport, the escalating costs of home to school transport? And then secondly, a similar question that I put to Sarah, are we seeing the cost rise of home to school transport because of the rising population? So 2 things.
I can answer both of those. So I think it's yes and yes is the answer to both of those. So yes, the increase in population and that bulge coming through into secondary is increasing the number of routes that we need to put on to cater for the young people who are travelling. And yes, in the SEND space, we obviously, that complexity of need means that we're seeing much more one-to-one provision in taxis and that, which is obviously increasing the costs for those young people travelling to school as well. So in both instances, a bit like the SEND issue itself, it's both numbers and complexity which are driving those increasing costs.
so I suppose the logical response to that then is that the additional funding that we get for being a growing population just is not anywhere near meeting the complexities.
No, and to add said complexity further, the dedicated schools grant high needs block cannot be used to transport. Transport is a local authority responsibility from the funding. So the high needs block is just used to support the provision for the individual pupils, not those associated transport costs. So yes, it's a double hit really in terms of that impact.
Well, if I should have known that before, I'm sorry I didn't. I'm glad I do now.
Thank you. I think that's everybody who's indicated to speak. Not seeing any hands. So we just asked to note this report, which we've done. Thank you, Martin and Martin. The final item on today's agenda is item 9, the committee agenda plan, training plan and committee appointments. Tamar, do we have any changes to the published agenda plan, please?
I did receive one change, the deed of variation to enable the building of the permanent accommodation of Wisbech Free School. That's moving to the February committee.
Thank you. Any comments on the committee Oh, I'm seeing arms, sorry. Is this on the agenda plan? Okay.
All right, mine's on the agenda. I was going to bring this up for the adults and health agenda plan, and we'll do anyway. But after one of our officer reports earlier, the Care Academy, which was launched, as she said, last year, and with much support and enthusiasm from me, I'm wondering where that a report on progress will come. Because it's very hard to know just how much take up there is, how it's doing, how is it fitting in with Cambridge skills. So is it going to be a cosmic business? Is it going to be the same thing being said twice in adults and health and children and young people? Maybe the former would make sense. But I would like to see something back to tell us how it's going. Thank you.
I'll ask for a briefing note, and the date was 20th of November last year. See, I was listening. But yes, I will ask for a briefing note on the Care Academy and how many students we've supported and that kind of thing. That would be good. Councillor Daunton, please.
Yes, a legitimate question on the training plan. We've just heard from Sarah about the safety valve, and we did have a briefing on the safety valve last year. Could we have an up-to-date briefing on the safety valve? I mean, some of us who were sitting on School Forum on Friday heard in detail about the enhanced resource bases. It would be interesting, helpful maybe to all members to hear that kind of detailed information.
Thank you. And we are looking at our training plan, particularly in light of May, where we may well have new members who need an awful lot of training. So I can't promise it won't be before then, but that would definitely be included as part of something. And I can see Tamar's noting it. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Just one point on the agenda plan, bearing in mind the discussion we've had on the safety valve today and the meeting at the end of October, and I believe Sarah said there's a meeting later this week. I think it should be on either January or February's agenda for us to be, as a committee, to be updated on that.
Having looked at those agendas in detail, they are very large agendas, but I will make sure that there is a note.
It's a massive issue for us.
Obviously, it's a massive issue. It's a huge, I will make sure we get an update. It may well be in the form of a note rather than a report.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, Chair.
No, sorry, you're fine. You're fine. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. Noting that those who voted against or for the sprinkler system have put us a further £1 million towards a deficit. I just wanted to ask that when we have that briefing on the safety valve, we can have some detail about some of the major projects that we're doing with regard to that, and that we can be clear about the commitments that we've made and where they fit. Thank you.
As in the capital projects, because that's a very different place. That's where that would come under. That wouldn't come under the safety valve deficit. So that would come under the
By all
capital
means, under
in
a capital,
the FMR
under
and
a
in the
capital
budgets.
set.
It will
planning.
come when capitals next come through, or would come through the budget lines as in the FMR and that kind of thing. Yeah.
By all means, whenever it's appropriate to bring it to us. Thank you.
It would. Councillor Hoy.
Yeah, sorry, just on a point of order, actually, councillor Bradham's not correct, because if you remember, as you pointed out, the majority voted in favour of option A, which means the sprinklers will have to be done within the existing budget. So it won't be an additional £1 million cost on top of the budget. It will be done within the budget envelope.
With your permission, Chair, and something else will have to be lost.
We will have to look at the budget, obviously, and the revised programme for the school and that entirety. Before we go, I would like members to note that Councillor Thompson has replaced Councillor Atkins as a non-voting member on Schools Forum, which brings us to the end of today's business. Thank you all. We'll next meet on Tuesday, the 14th of January 2025.